Hey everybody, this is Charlie from Anthrax, and you are listening to the one and only Manic Noize podcast. Turn it up.
Hello again, welcome back to the Manic Noize podcast. Like I said last time, it's been a while. Been a while in between episodes, and I promised a quick turnaround, and as somebody who fucks up and doesn't often deliver on their promises, I've kept true to my word, and here we are. This podcast is with Eric Bischoff. If you don't know who he is, he was the man that brought WCW Wrestling into the limelight in the 90s. In fact, they went up against WWE for 83 straight weeks. They killed him in the ratings. He was involved in WWE Raw, NWO, TNA Impact. Basically, in the 90s, he was like Vince McMahon's mortal enemy. If you're a wrestling fan, you know this already. If you're not a wrestling fan, you're going to find this super interesting anyway. We go into the business of wrestling, how to promote yourself as an independent wrestler and or artist, just his approach to building a brand, what he's looking forward to about coming to Australia, which is this tour is kicking off this week, and just a great dude with a lot of insight across a lot of different areas, from business to pro wrestling, and I think just life in general. So enjoy this chat with Eric Bischoff. Please follow the podcast at Manic Noize on Facebook. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Old Mate Douglas, and also on Twitter. And give the podcast a like wherever you listen to it. iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube. There's about fucking 15 others. Basically, if you search it, you'll find it. Tell your friends, leave a positive comment, leave a 5-star review, get yourself along to one of Eric Bischoff's Australian shows, and thanks for listening. I look forward to having you back for the next episode.
Podcast initiation complete. Warning, this episode may cause brain damage.
Hey, this is Trevor Sternat from the Black Dahlia Murder here. You're listening to the Manic Noize podcast.
Hey, Eric, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, thank you.
That's good to hear, mate. Good to hear. So you're on your way down to Australia for the 83 Weeks tour. How are you looking forward to these shows?
I'm looking forward to it very much. And I've been to Australia a couple times. The most recent time, 7 or 8 years ago, with the Hulkamania tour that I was promoting. And just really, really love the people. You know, wrestling fans in Australia are very knowledgeable and passionate about the product. So it's always fun to engage an audience like that.
Yeah, definitely. And are you familiar with the Australian wrestling scene at all?
I'm really not. You know, obviously there's nothing available here on television, and I don't seek it out online. You know, from what I've been reading and hearing from a lot of people I know that are in the independent scene full time, you know, it's an important market, and it's growing very rapidly from what I understand.
Yeah, on a grassroots level, it's really starting to take off in the same way that the UFC did, WCW did, where there's all these local shows popping up, all these guys are getting into it independently, and shit, man, some of the talent with the wrestlers is world class.
That's what I understand from everybody I talk to. So I don't know that I'll get any time on this trip to take in any local independent wrestling. In fact, I'm sure I won't. But I do look forward to seeing some videos and catching up on the scene as best I can while I'm there.
Well, I'm sure all the wrestlers here listening will be getting up to some outlandish shit on the hopes that they catch your eye, mate.
Well, stay safe. That's all I ask. Just stay safe. Don't get tricked.
So you've been to Australia quite a few times. Have you been doing these shows all around the world, or is this sort of something that's been just starting up now?
No, I've done about, I would say a dozen or so of these shows in the last year. I just started a couple months ago, so I'm doing quite a few of them. I've done them all over the United States already. I'm doing a tour of Canada starting in July. I'm doing 30 shows and 30 nights, coast to coast in Canada. So we're going to start in Vancouver on the West Coast, and we're going to head east and do a show every single night until we get to Prince Edward Island on the East Coast.
That's awesome. When you're putting these shows together, you know, you've got so much to talk about between WCW, NWO, Raw. Have you got to be a little bit careful with these shows? Because I assume some of these stories could be a bit incriminating to some of the parties involved.
Yes, indeed they are, and that's all of the fun. And those are the stories that you won't hear on the podcast, but you will hear live.
How is this different to the podcast? I mean, are you approaching it, in a sort of stand-up comedy way, or what's your approach to taking these sort of experiences to a live show?
Well, it's probably a lot like stand-up comedy with a question and answer mixed in the middle. I'm not a comedian. I don't try to be a comedian, but inherently, professional wrestling is incredibly funny. And there are incredibly funny people in the wrestling business, and the stories that that we can tell, backstage and on the road and in the hotels are incredibly funny, and they have people rolling over laughing. Not because I'm a comedian, but because the stories are just funny stories. You couldn't write them if you were a comedian. You could write a story that funny. So yeah, it's formatted a little bit like, the first 20 minutes or so will be a lot of those funny stories and bizarre situations I've found myself in over the last 30 years. And then we kind of transition into a Q&A format. And that's really where, because it's, the live shows are very interactive. The audience is a really important part of the show. So I encourage the audience to, participate in as many different ways as they can, especially during the Q&A. And one of the other things that I'm doing specifically for this tour, I've never done it anywhere else, but I'm going to do it for Australia, is I'm going to challenge any of your listeners or anybody in any of the shows, if they think they've got the chops and can pull it off and be Australia's next Conrad Thompson, I'm going to invite them up on the stage and, do part of the show with me, just like Conrad Thompson would do. So it's a fun, interactive, humorous, but in a way, very informative, almost educational show, because inevitably, if you listen to my podcast, I talk a lot about the business of the wrestling business, and why certain decisions are made, and all of the things that people normally don't ever talk about. They talk about finishes and they talk about matches and who did the best drop kick and who did the best hurricane rana and all that kind of stuff. I tend, we talk about that a lot, but we also talk about the business of the business. So my goal, quite honestly, when I do a show, I have two goals. One is I want people to laugh their asses off, and two is I want them to walk away feeling like they know a lot more about the wrestling business that they love than they knew before they came to the show.
That's great. And really, once you get that deep into anything, and, wrestling fans are super passionate, you're the guy that's got all those juicy bits that they've wanted to hear about all these years.
Yeah, and like I say, to be able to talk, in not in a way that sounds like a business class, at university, but in a way that people can understand and relate to, and understand why. So not just in WCW when I was there, but even today in WWE, why do they do the things that they do? As someone in the audience, we may get frustrated with some of those things, but I like to get into the why of it, so that at least people can understand, why they're seeing what they're seeing. But it's really interesting. It's a fascinating business, and it's far more complex than people really understand.
Yeah, definitely. And with AEW coming out now, and they've kicked straight out of the gate in 2019, they seem to be bringing a bit more of that attitude era with them. What's your thoughts on this approach? And it seems to be going back to that MA 15 plus area and away from the PG state that some of the organizations are taking now.
Yeah, it is, because that's a part of the audience, a demographic that is currently underserved. When I was able to do what I achieved at WCW, it's because I went after an entirely different part of the audience than the WWF did. When I launched Nitro, WWF was it was more PG then than it is now.
Yeah,
far more. And their audience was really targeted towards children and preteens and teens. Where, I realized that, and I targeted my show so that I was appealing to 18 to 39-year-olds, a more mature audience. That's why I integrated more reality in my storylines and in my characters. Not all of it, but more of it.
Yeah.
And that's why my storylines had a more believable tone to them, as opposed to being purely fictional. I tried to write my shows in a way so that the audience wasn't sure what was real and what wasn't. That's always the part. That's always the part of the magic show that people really find fascinating. When you go see a magician, you're watching magic, but you just can't figure out how they sawed that lady in half. How did they do that? And that's what makes it so interesting. And I think that's the best part of professional wrestling. And that's, to a degree, AEW is whether they're doing it consciously or intentionally or unintentionally, but they're going after a harder-edged, older demographic. Now and that's good news because it's different than what's currently being presented. Here's the downside of that. From a television perspective, it gets very difficult to find advertisers who want to advertise in a show that is a television property that is geared towards that older demographic. Advertisers love kids. They really do, no matter what it is. Now, if you're selling cars and life insurance, that's a little different. But even then, a lot of the products a lot of the commercials and marketing and promotion is geared towards those early teens and mid-teens so that when they become adults, they're already excited about your Chevrolet or your Ford or your whatever it is, your Honda. They've already kind of identified with that brand. So, it's hard to find out. First of all, advertisers don't like wrestling too much anyway. Wrestling is kind of a sport, but it's not. It's kind of a drama, but it's not. It's it's kind of a comedy, but it's not. It's a hard thing to wrap your head around if you're not a wrestling fan. And for that reason, it makes it a real challenge. And now if you add to that they're going to get a little edgier and get away from the safer content, which advertisers prefer, you're painting yourself into a little bit of a small box unless you've got another revenue model or another way of making money that's not reliant upon television or ad sales. So it's like I said, I can talk about that till we're all bored, but it's going to be interesting to see how their strategy works and how it unfolds.
Well, I mean, obviously it's been done, and you're the man that did it. When you went head to head with the WWE and killed them in the ratings for 83 weeks, you were pushing this difficult to sell product, that's a bit less appealing for the 7 to 10-year-olds, but you managed to do it. What was it that got you past all those hurdles of, advertisers holding back and stuff? What was your approach to beating that?
Well, because number one, the company that owned WCW was a television company. Ah. And as such, they were more interested in us drawing an audience than they were selling advertisers. And again, this is where you have to, really understand how a network thinks. When a network looks at its primetime averages, for example, meaning, what's the average rating of all their shows in primetime during the course of the week? If that audience is starting to skew older, for example, and you because you're in the movie, TNT, when I was there, they had a lot of high-end movies and professional sports during the playoffs. That tends to draw an older demographic. So they were looking at wrestling at that time, not so much as an advertising revenue generator, but as a way to attract a younger demographic to the network so that they could expose that new audience to the rest of the programming on the network. Oh. So it was as much of a marketing tool for Turner Broadcasting as it was dependent upon advertising. So I didn't really face the challenge. Now, if I was doing it today, if somebody a network came to me and said, "Hey, Eric, we want you to build a wrestling company for us." Well, my first question to them is, okay, what's your network's demo in prime time? They would tell me what that is. My next question would be, well, what do you want it to be? What's your target? What do you hope the demographic for this show will be? Now, if they tell me we want to skew really, really young, then I'm going to lean more towards a PG type of a product. Mm-hmm. If they tell me, look, we're going to open it up a little bit and we want to go after 18 to 39-year-old men or 18 to 49-year-old men, and we want it to have a little bit more of an adult edge, then I would produce a show accordingly. So it really all depends on the network. And quite honestly, none of us really know what TNT's goals are. Are they looking just to get a new audience to come to the network that they don't already have, similarly to the way Ted Turner, used WCW? If that's the case, then, AEW is in good shape. Hold on a second. If on the other hand, the goal is to really drive advertising revenue, then their backs are going to be up against the wall for the reasons that I discussed a few moments ago.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, man. What sucks is I hate seeing that it's all tied into marketing and all that sort of stuff, but it's the same with anything. I'm a stand-up comedian, and you've got to push yourself, and then you've got to the people that get a lot of opportunities are the ones with the pretty face and the nice ass, and it's just the way it is. What would you say to a wrestler or somebody that's wanting to be a promoter that's coming up, as far as getting one of these goals like you did in an industry where you're not really supposed to be successful statistics-wise?
Yeah, I always look. I mean, there's no secret sauce. If I had it, I would put it in bottles and sell it. So there's no real secret sauce. And as corny as it sounds or commonplace as it sounds, it always starts with an amazing amount of hard work and commitment. No matter what it is, no matter what you want to be, you have to work 10 times harder than you ever thought you would, and you have to enjoy doing it. And I always used to tell people that work for me, there's two things that I focus on: working as hard as I possibly can while having as much fun as I possibly can. Now, fun doesn't mean I'm laughing and joking and slapping people on the back and drinking beer at work all day, but fun means enjoying your work and being challenged by it and being able to embrace those challenges as a gift and not look at those challenges as something that's life-threatening or career-ending. And if you work really hard and you find ways to have fun and enjoyment in what you do, chances are really good you're going to be successful. And I think in the wrestling business in particular, if you add to those two qualities of working hard and having fun, if you add to that, finding ways to make yourself really unique and memorable. And that doesn't always mean doing crazy things, jumping off balconies and, putting your body or somebody else's body at risk. It just means as a character, as what do you do? Just like, as a comedian, what do you do that other comedians don't do that make people remember you or talk about you?
Yep.
And it's the same thing in professional wrestling. You have to have something that makes you unique and memorable.
Well put. I heard Dr. Phil say something recently, and it was the difference between a dream and a goal is a timeline and accountability. And I thought that was really good.
Yeah, and it's and it's true. In anything, but I think especially in professional wrestling, because it is it's a unique business. It's a uniquely challenging business because it's so physical. And because it is hard to get exposure and to get out in front of people. But, if you look at, a large part of the current WWE roster did exactly that, working in independent shows and getting their name out there on the independent circuit and getting some attention, now with YouTube and all the streaming capabilities that are out there and potential and social media like, Twitter and all of it, Instagram, there's a million ways to get yourself out there. Now you just have to kind of figure out what works best for you and stick with it.
Yeah, definitely, man. What is it you're looking forward to most about coming down to Australia? Is there a particular place that you've been here that you really enjoyed that you're looking forward to seeing again?
Well, obviously Sydney's a beautiful city. I love Sydney, but I love Melbourne too, and Brisbane. I mean, every city has its own unique personality and things that make it attractive, and history. I'm a big fan of history, so whenever I go into a community, I like to spend a little time learning as much as I can while I'm there. And sometimes I can do that in my hotel room on my laptop, and other times I'll get in a taxi and go visit places. So I always love doing that. Mostly though, it's the fans. Australian fans, as I said, are they're passionate. They really love the product. They know the product. And anytime you get to engage with people like that, especially at a live show, it makes everything more fun.
Definitely. Awesome, man. Well, Everyone's looking forward to seeing you. You've got the 83 Weeks tour, which kicks off on Friday, June 21st in Sydney, on the 22nd in Brisbane, and the 23rd in Melbourne. And anyone listening can get tickets at destroyalllines.com. Eric, thanks so much for chatting to me, man. This has been great.
Thank you, and put the word out. If there's anybody out there listening that thinks they can be Australia's next Conrad Thompson, do your research, do your homework, step up to the plate. I'll get you up on stage and we'll see what you got.
Awesome, man. That's great. Hey, Eric, just before you go, I have a friend who's one of the best rappers in the country, and he is a massive wrestling fan and a huge fan of yours. Is there any chance I could get a shout out to a rapper named Bluntfield?
All right. Well, you asked me earlier, what am I looking forward to when I get to Australia? And I think meeting and hanging and maybe having a pint with Bluntfield has got to be pretty high on my list of things to do.
Dude, he is going to have a heart attack when he hears this. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in. This has been the Manic Noize podcast with Eric Bischoff, the godfather of pro wrestling himself. When people say they used to like wrestling in the 90s, but they don't anymore, well, this is what you're talking about. You're talking about Eric Bischoff's product. What he brought to wrestling in the 90s is what we all love and what we all miss, quite frankly. So this was an awesome chat. Please, if you like the show, download some more episodes. There's heaps of episodes with killer comedians, with bands from all around the world in the rock genre. We've got Tech Nine, the biggest independent hip-hop artist of all time. Plenty of stuff to sink your teeth into. So leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to it. Leave a comment. Share the shit out of it. Add the Facebook at Manic Noize with a Z. Add me on Instagram at Old Mate Douglas and on Facebook at Old Mate Douglas. Well, we'll see you next week with Andy Dowling from the metal band Lord. He's also from the Andy Social podcast and the Self-Starter podcast. Really good friend of mine. He's doing great things with both his killer power metal band Lord and both of his podcasts. I've been fortunate enough to be on his show. He's been on my show. He's back on my show again. And we've broken this next episode into 2 parts. One, focusing on all the shenanigans that go on in central Queensland. That one's fucking entertaining. And the second one gets a bit more deep and philosophical. So enjoy. Thank you for listening to the Manic Noize podcast. I'm Hayden Douglas. Stay evil.
I'm just a little bit manic. Self-doubt can get fucked and leave with his throat cut. Wrapped up in a shit rug, chucked into a dump truck. Locked up, beaten and broken. If you think you're getting back into my head, you're joking. Messed up but not corrupt at the core. Bipolar as fuck, it's tough to hold on. Been a slave and a victim, too self-doubt and religious. Stressed about death when I should have been living. I'm faster than the speed of light. Shotgun brought into a knife fight. When I'm in a downward spiral, I'm fucking miserable. Now I'm on the upswing, I am invincible. Don't panic, I'm just a bit manic. Charismatic, erratic, ecstatic for the fucking mania. Satanic, I'm addicted to the rush. I'm just a little bit manic.